Sarah Mitchell stood in her spacious walk-in closet, surrounded by rows of tailored business suits and designer dresses that hung like silent sentinels of corporate power. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of her penthouse apartment, casting gentle shadows across the polished hardwood floors. At 52, Sarah had built First National Bank into one of the most respected financial institutions in the region, but success had never changed her fundamental belief that true leadership meant understanding people at every level. She reached past the expensive blazers and selected her favorite navy cardigan, soft from years of wear, and pulled it on over a simple white t-shirt. Her comfortable jeans came next, followed by her worn but reliable walking shoes. Sarah caught her reflection in the full-length mirror and smiled softly. Her graying hair was already escaping from its neat ponytail, and without makeup, she looked like any other middle-aged woman preparing for a day of errands. This was exactly the image she wanted to project. For the past 15 years as president and CEO, Sarah had made it her practice to conduct unannounced visits to her branch locations, always dressed as an ordinary customer. She believed that the true measure of an organization revealed itself in how employees treated people they perceived as having no power or influence. Her executive team often questioned this approach, suggesting that formal inspections would be more efficient. But Sarah knew that authentic leadership required authentic experiences. She had learned early in her career that policies and procedures meant nothing if they were not lived out in daily interactions with real customers. Today, she would visit the downtown branch, one of their most prestigious locations that served the city's wealthiest residents. Sarah had been receiving subtle complaints about the atmosphere there. Whispers that some customers felt unwelcome, that the staff had become elitist and judgmental. She needed to see for herself whether First National Bank was truly serving all members of the community with the dignity and respect that formed the foundation of her leadership philosophy. Sarah grabbed her simple leather purse, the kind that could be found at any department store, and checked that her identification was securely tucked inside. She had no idea that this routine visit would become a defining moment, not just for her own understanding of her organization, but for everyone who would witness what was about to unfold. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. Sarah Mitchell stood in her spacious walk-in closet, surrounded by rows of tailored business suits and designer dresses that hung like silent sentinels of corporate power. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of her penthouse apartment, casting gentle shadows across the polished hardwood floors. At 52, Sarah had built First National Bank into one of the most respected financial institutions in the region, but success had never changed her fundamental belief that true leadership meant understanding people at every level. She reached past the expensive blazers and selected her favorite navy cardigan, soft from years of wear, and pulled it on over a simple white t-shirt. Her comfortable jeans came next, followed by her worn but reliable walking shoes. Sarah caught her reflection in the full-length mirror and smiled softly. Her graying hair was already escaping from its neat ponytail, and without makeup, she looked like any other middle-aged woman preparing for a day of errands. This was exactly the image she wanted to project. For the past 15 years as president and CEO, Sarah had made it her practice to conduct unannounced visits to her branch locations, always dressed as an ordinary customer. She believed that the true measure of an organization revealed itself in how employees treated people they perceived as having no power or influence. Her executive team often questioned this approach, suggesting that formal inspections would be more efficient. But Sarah knew that authentic leadership required authentic experiences. She had learned early in her career that policies and procedures meant nothing if they were not lived out in daily interactions with real customers. Today, she would visit the downtown branch, one of their most prestigious locations that served the city's wealthy residents. Sarah had been receiving subtle complaints about the atmosphere there, whispers that some customers felt unwelcome, that the staff had become elitist and judgmental. She needed to see for herself whether First National Bank was truly serving all members of the community with the dignity and respect that formed the foundation of her leadership philosophy. Sarah grabbed her simple leather purse, the kind that could be found at any department store, and checked that her identification was securely tucked inside. She had no idea that this routine visit would become a defining moment, not just for her own understanding of her organization, but for everyone who would witness what was about to unfold. The towering glass doors of First National Bank's downtown branch gleamed in the afternoon sun as Sarah approached the entrance. The moment she stepped inside, her worn sneakers made soft whispers against the pristine Italian marble floors that stretched across the expansive lobby like a frozen sea of cream and gold veining. Crystal chandeliers hung from the soaring ceiling, casting warm light that danced across polished brass fixtures and mahogany panels that spoke of old money and established power. The air itself seemed to hum with quiet authority and unmistakable wealth. Behind gleaming teller windows, staff members moved with practiced precision, their crisp white shirts and perfectly knotted ties creating an almost choreographed display of professional excellence. Every surface sparkled, every corner was immaculate, and every detail had been designed to communicate one clear message. This was a place for important people with important business. Sarah's simple cardigan and faded jeans created a jarring contrast against this backdrop of luxury. Like a wildflower growing through cracks in a marble statue, she could feel eyes turning toward her. Assessing, measuring, judging, the soft murmur of conversation that had filled the lobby seemed to quiet slightly as customers in expensive suits and designer handbags noticed her presence. Near the entrance, Marcus Webb straightened his shoulders and adjusted his perfectly pressed security uniform. At 45, Marcus took enormous pride in his role as the first line of defense for First National's most prestigious location. His black uniform was spotless, his badge polished to a mirror shine, and his posture radiated the confidence of a man who knew his worth. For 12 years, Marcus had worked at this branch, and he had developed what he considered an expert eye for people who belonged and those who clearly did not. He prided himself on his ability to spot trouble before it started, to identify individuals who might disturb the refined atmosphere that their wealthy clientele expected and deserved. Marcus had earned commendations from management for his discretion in guiding certain visitors toward more appropriate locations, always with a professional smile and carefully chosen words that avoided any legal complications. He understood that his job was about more than security. It was about maintaining the exclusive environment that made First National's downtown branch the preferred choice for the city's elite. As Sarah moved deeper into the lobby, Marcus's trained gaze followed her every step, his hand unconsciously moving toward his radio as his instincts began to sound their familiar alarm. Marcus Webb's polished shoes clicked against the marble floor as he approached Sarah with the measured stride of a man accustomed to handling delicate situations. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes held the sharp assessment of someone who had made up his mind before the conversation even began. He positioned himself directly in Sarah's path, his imposing 6-foot frame creating an unmistakable barrier between her and the rest of the banking floor. "Excuse me, ma'am," Marcus said, his voice carrying the practiced politeness that barely concealed his underlying suspicion. "I couldn't help but notice you seem a bit uncertain about where you're going. Are you perhaps looking for something specific?" His tone suggested he already knew the answer, and it wasn't something that belonged in this pristine environment. Sarah looked up at him with calm gray eyes, her expression remaining pleasant despite the obvious challenge in his approach. "Good afternoon," she replied evenly. "I'm here to conduct some business with the bank." Marcus's eyebrows raised slightly, and he glanced meaningfully at her casual attire before returning his gaze to her face. "I see. And what kind of business would that be, exactly? Because I have to tell you, ma'am, if you're looking for social services or assistance programs, you'd probably have better luck at our community branch about 15 minutes from here. They specialize in those types of situations." The condescension in his voice was becoming more apparent with each word. Though he maintained his professional facade, Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. But her voice remained steady. "I appreciate your concern, but I'm quite certain I'm in the right place. I have legitimate banking business to conduct here." Marcus chuckled softly, the sound carrying no warmth whatsoever. "Look, I'm not trying to be difficult here, but this particular branch caters to a very specific clientele. Our services here are geared toward high net worth individuals and premium account holders. I'm just trying to save you some embarrassment and wasted time. The folks here, he gestured vaguely toward the well-dressed customers conducting their business at various stations. They're used to a certain atmosphere. I'm sure you understand. His smile was patronizing, the kind reserved for children who needed gentle correction. Sarah took a deep breath, her hands clasping her simple purse a little tighter. I understand perfectly, she said quietly. And I'm prepared to conduct my business here, just like any other customer. Marcus's expression hardened slightly, his patience beginning to wear thin with what he perceived as stubborn ignorance of social boundaries. From her glass-enclosed office overlooking the main banking floor, Victoria Hartwell had been watching the interaction between Marcus and the poorly dressed woman with growing irritation. At 38, Victoria had clawed her way up through the ranks of First National Bank through a combination of ruthless efficiency and an unwavering commitment to what she called maintaining standards. Her tailored charcoal suit was perfectly pressed, her auburn hair styled in an immaculate bob that never seemed to have a strand out of place, and her manicured nails drummed impatiently against her mahogany desk as she observed what she considered to be a deteriorating situation. Victoria prided herself on running the most profitable and prestigious branch in the entire First National system, a success she attributed to her keen ability to recognize and cater to the right kind of clientele while diplomatically discouraging those who might diminish the branch's exclusive atmosphere. She leaned toward her assistant, Rebecca Martinez, a young woman who had learned to anticipate Victoria's moods and concerns with practiced precision. Rebecca, do you see what's happening out there? Victoria whispered, her voice tight with barely contained frustration. That woman in the cardigan is exactly the type of situation we've discussed in our staff meetings. People like that simply don't understand the nature of our services here, and frankly, their presence makes our actual clients uncomfortable. Rebecca glanced through the glass walls and nodded uncertainly, though something about the woman's calm dignity gave her pause. Victoria continued, her voice growing more animated with righteous conviction. Look at her clothes, Rebecca. Look at how she's dressed for what she probably thinks is an important banking visit. That cardigan has seen better days. Those jeans are completely inappropriate for a financial institution of our caliber, and don't even get me started on those shoes. She clearly doesn't understand the environment she's walked into, and Marcus is being far too patient with her. Our premium clients expect a certain atmosphere when they conduct their business here, and we simply cannot allow that atmosphere to be compromised by people who don't belong. Victoria stood up from her desk, straightening her jacket with sharp, decisive movements. I'm going to handle this personally before it becomes a bigger disruption. Sometimes you have to be firm but fair, and help people understand where they might be more comfortable. It's really a kindness when you think about it. Her heels clicking against the polished floor with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her own judgment or authority. Victoria's approach across the marble floor was a masterclass in controlled aggression disguised as professional concern, her designer heels announcing her arrival with each deliberate click that seemed to echo her authority throughout the hushed lobby. She wore her most practiced smile, the one she reserved for delicate situations that required a firm hand wrapped in velvet diplomacy, and positioned herself slightly behind Marcus as if to present a united front of institutional wisdom. Victoria said, her voice carrying the honeyed tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. I'm Victoria Hartwell, the branch manager here, and I couldn't help but notice that you seem to be having some difficulty. I do hope Marcus has been helpful, but I thought I might step in to provide some additional guidance. Her eyes swept over Sarah's appearance, with the clinical assessment of an appraiser evaluating damaged goods, taking in every detail from the frayed edges of the cardigan to the scuffed toes of her comfortable shoes. You know, Victoria continued, her smile never wavering even as her words grew more pointed. I've been managing this particular branch for 8 years now, and I've developed quite an understanding of how to match our clients with the services that best meet their specific needs and circumstances. She paused meaningfully, allowing her implication to settle in the air between them like morning frost. We have several other First National locations throughout the city that might be much more suitable for someone in your situation. Our Riverside branch, for instance, has a wonderful community outreach program and specializes in serving clients from all walks of life. They're really quite accommodating to people from your demographic, and I think you'd find the atmosphere there much more welcoming and appropriate. Sarah's gray eyes flashed with a spark of controlled anger, but her voice remained perfectly level when she responded. I appreciate your concern, Miss Hartwell, but I can assure you that I belong here just as much as any other customer. I have legitimate business to conduct, and I intend to conduct it at this location. Victoria's smile flickered for just a moment, revealing a flash of irritation at what she perceived as stubborn defiance of her professional guidance. I'm sure you believe that, dear, but sometimes we don't fully understand the complexities of different banking environments. This branch handles very sophisticated financial transactions for clients with substantial assets and complex needs. Perhaps you're not aware of our fee structures and minimum requirements here, which can be quite prohibitive for most people. I'm really trying to save you from potential embarrassment. Her tone had shifted subtly, the veneer of kindness wearing thin to reveal the steel underneath. Sarah straightened her shoulders and met Victoria's gaze directly. I understand exactly what kind of business is conducted here, and I am fully prepared to meet any requirements necessary. I would appreciate being treated with the same courtesy and respect that any customer deserves. The confrontation had begun to draw the attention of other customers throughout the lobby, and Sarah could feel the weight of their curious stares as conversations gradually quieted and heads turned in their direction. Near the premium banking stations, Margaret Whitmore, the wife of a prominent real estate developer, paused in her discussion with a financial advisor to observe the unfolding drama with undisguised fascination. She leaned toward her companion and whispered something behind her manicured hand, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she gestured subtly toward Sarah's modest appearance. At the investment services counter, Thomas Richardson, CEO of Richardson Industries, found his attention divided between his portfolio review and the increasingly tense exchange near the entrance, his expensive suit and gold cufflinks marking him as exactly the kind of client Victoria was determined to protect from any uncomfortable encounters. The murmur of whispered observations began to ripple through the marble halls like ripples across a still pond, and Victoria could sense the growing audience for what she had decided was a necessary demonstration of her commitment to maintaining standards. Her smile had completely disappeared now, replaced by the stern expression of someone who had exhausted her patience with unreasonable behavior. You know what? I think we need to clarify exactly what kind of account you believe you have with us, Victoria said, her voice rising slightly in volume and authority. I'm going to need to see some identification and verify your account status before we can proceed any further with this conversation. Frankly, I'm beginning to suspect there may be some confusion on your part about your actual relationship with this institution. Her tone had shifted from condescending politeness to barely concealed aggression, and Marcus stepped slightly closer, as if sensing the need to provide backup for what was clearly becoming a more serious confrontation. Sarah reached into her simple leather purse with deliberate calm, her movements unhurried despite the growing tension surrounding her like a tightening noose. She withdrew her driver's license and handed it to Victoria with the same quiet dignity she had maintained throughout the entire encounter. Here is my identification, she said evenly, though those watching closely might have noticed the slight tightening around her eyes that suggested her composure was requiring considerable effort to maintain. Victoria snatched the ID from Sarah's hand with a quick, dismissive gesture and barely glanced at it before looking back up with an expression of professional skepticism. She held the license as if it were contaminated, turning it over perfunctorily without actually reading the information printed there. Sarah Mitchell, she said, pronouncing the name as if it confirmed every suspicion she had harbored. Well, Miss Mitchell, I'll need to verify this information in our system, but I have to tell you that your behavior here today has been quite disruptive to our other clients. Victoria's voice had risen enough that every person in the lobby could hear her words clearly, and the wealthy customers were no longer bothering to hide their stares and whispered commentary about the spectacle unfolding before them. Victoria held Sarah's identification between two fingers as if it were evidence of a crime, her expression shifting to one of theatrical concern mixed with professional authority that she clearly believed justified her increasingly aggressive behavior. There seems to be some sort of discrepancy here, she announced loudly enough for the growing audience of customers to hear every word. her voice carrying the weight of someone who had discovered exactly what she had expected to find all along. "Miss Mitchell, I'm afraid there may be some confusion about your account status with our institution, and frankly, given the circumstances of this encounter, I think we need to involve additional staff to sort this matter out properly." She turned toward the teller stations and called out in a voice that brooked no argument, "Jennifer, could you come over here, please? I need you to look up an account for me right away." Jennifer Cole looked up from her station where she had been helping an elderly gentleman with his monthly pension deposit, her kind brown eyes immediately taking in the tense scene that had developed near the entrance. At 26, Jennifer had been working at the bank for 3 years, and she had always prided herself on treating every customer with the same courtesy and respect, regardless of their appearance or apparent wealth. Something about the way Victoria was handling this situation made her deeply uncomfortable, and as she approached the group, she could see that the woman in the cardigan was maintaining her dignity despite being subjected to what looked like public humiliation. "Yes, Miss Hartwell," Jennifer said quietly, hoping to lower the temperature of the confrontation that was clearly spiraling out of control. "Could you please look up the account information for Sarah Mitchell?" Victoria said, handing over the driver's license with a flourish that suggested she was presenting evidence of wrongdoing. "I need to verify her standing with our institution before we can proceed any further with this matter." Jennifer took the identification and glanced at it, then looked up at Sarah with an expression of genuine respect and concern. "Of course, Miss Mitchell. I'd be happy to help you with whatever you need today. If you could just give me a moment to access our system, I'll get this sorted out right away." Her voice was warm and professional, a stark contrast to the hostile atmosphere that Victoria and Marcus had created around the simple request for banking services. Victoria's jaw tightened at Jennifer's respectful tone, and she quickly interjected before the younger woman could continue. "Jennifer, I need you to understand that this is a sensitive situation that requires careful handling. Please just verify the account status so we can address any irregularities appropriately." Her emphasis on the word irregularities made it clear that she expected Jennifer to find problems that would justify the treatment Sarah was receiving, and Jennifer found herself caught between her instinct to provide good customer service and the clear expectations of her supervisor, who controlled her career advancement and job security. Victoria's voice grew louder and more confident as she sensed the support of the wealthy customers who were now openly watching the confrontation, with expressions that ranged from curiosity to approval for her handling of what they clearly viewed as an uncomfortable intrusion into their exclusive environment. "Miss Mitchell," Victoria said, her tone taking on the patronizing quality of someone explaining basic facts to a confused child, "I think we need to have an honest conversation about whether our services here are really appropriate for someone in your financial situation. Our minimum balance requirements for premium accounts are quite substantial, and our fee structures are designed for clients with significant assets and income levels. Perhaps you weren't fully aware of these requirements when you decided to visit us today." The lobby had grown almost completely silent except for Victoria's increasingly loud voice, and Sarah could feel the weight of dozens of eyes examining her simple clothing and modest appearance with the clinical interest of people watching a social experiment unfold before them. Margaret Whitmore had moved closer with her financial advisor, no longer bothering to whisper as she commented audibly about people who didn't understand their place in society, while Thomas Richardson nodded approvingly at Victoria's firm handling of what he clearly viewed as an appropriate defense of the bank's standards. Victoria continued her public lecture, emboldened by the obvious support from the customers she was determined to protect. "Now, I don't want you to feel embarrassed about this misunderstanding, but I really think you might benefit from exploring some of our community assistance programs. We have partnerships with several local organizations that help people in challenging financial circumstances access basic banking services that are more suited to their needs. There's no shame in seeking appropriate help, and I think you'd find those programs much more welcoming than trying to access services that frankly may be beyond your means." Sarah's hands slowly clenched into fists at her sides, and for the first time since entering the bank, her carefully maintained composure began to show hairline cracks of controlled fury. Her gray eyes flashed with an intensity that would have warned anyone who truly knew her that they were treading on dangerous ground, but Victoria was too intoxicated by her sense of righteous authority to notice the storm gathering in the woman she had so thoroughly misjudged. "I can assure you," Sarah said, her voice still quiet but carrying an edge of steel that cut through the marble hall like a blade, "that I am fully capable of affording any services this bank has to offer, and I am not here seeking charity or assistance programs. I am here to conduct legitimate business, and I expect to be treated with the respect that any customer deserves." The controlled anger in her voice was unmistakable now, though she maintained her dignity even as the humiliation reached new depths of public spectacle. Marcus Webb's radio had crackled to life during Victoria's public confrontation with Sarah, and within moments he had summoned additional security personnel, who now flanked him as he approached the increasingly tense situation with the measured confidence of someone who believed he was about to restore order to a disrupted environment. Officer James Peterson, a younger security guard who looked up to Marcus as a mentor in the art of maintaining institutional standards, positioned himself strategically near the exit, while Marcus himself stepped forward to support Victoria's obvious need for backup in what had clearly become a more serious disturbance than initially anticipated. The presence of additional security sent a ripple of excitement through the gathered customers, who sensed that they were witnessing something significant unfold before their eyes, a real-time demonstration of how their exclusive banking environment was protected from inappropriate intrusions. Victoria straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin with the dramatic flair of someone who had reached the limits of her professional patience and was prepared to take decisive action for the good of everyone involved. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced in a voice that carried clearly throughout the marble lobby, addressing the crowd of wealthy customers as if they were her personal constituency, "I apologize for this disruption to your banking experience today. Unfortunately, despite our attempts to provide helpful guidance, this individual has chosen to create a disturbance that is making our valued clients uncomfortable and interfering with the professional atmosphere that you have every right to expect when you visit First National Bank." Her words were met with nods of approval from Margaret Whitmore and Thomas Richardson, who had been joined by several other well-dressed customers who clearly felt that Victoria was handling the situation with appropriate firmness and professional judgment. Victoria turned back to Sarah with the expression of someone delivering a final ultimatum. "Miss Mitchell, I'm afraid your behavior here today has crossed the line from confusion to disruption, and I simply cannot allow this to continue. You are making our customers uncomfortable, you are interfering with normal business operations, and frankly, your refusal to accept our professional guidance suggests that you are not prepared to conduct yourself appropriately in this environment. I am going to have to ask you to leave the premises immediately, and I would strongly encourage you to consider visiting one of our other locations that might be better equipped to handle your particular needs and circumstances." The dramatic pronouncement hung in the air like a gavel. Strike. And Marcus stepped forward with his backup, ready to escort Sarah from the building with the satisfied confidence of security professionals who believed they were protecting their institution from an individual who had clearly overstepped the boundaries of appropriate behavior and social understanding. Sarah took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders, making one final attempt to reason with people who had clearly decided that her simple appearance told them everything they needed to know about her worth as a human being. "Please," she said, her voice carrying the quiet strength of someone who had spent decades learning to command respect through competence rather than intimidation. "I understand there has been a misunderstanding here, but I am telling you that I have every right to be in this bank, and I have legitimate business to conduct. If you would just listen to me for one moment and actually verify my information properly, you would realize that you are making a serious mistake." But Victoria raised her hand with the imperious gesture of someone who had heard quite enough from a person she considered to be fundamentally out of touch with reality. "Miss Mitchell, please stop," she said with the weary tone of someone addressing a particularly stubborn child who refused to accept basic facts about the world. "I think what's happening here is that you simply don't understand how society works, and frankly, that's not entirely your fault. Some people grow up understanding social boundaries and appropriate behavior, while others need to learn these lessons the hard way. There are places in this world for everyone, and those places are determined by education, achievement, financial success, and social standing. This particular place," she gestured grandly around the marble lobby, with its crystal chandeliers and wealthy clientele, is for people who have earned the right to be here through their contributions to society and their ability to meet certain standards. Now, that doesn't make you a bad person, but it does mean you need to recognize your limitations and find environments that are more suitable to your circumstances. Her words were met with enthusiastic murmurs of approval from the gathered customers, and Margaret Whitmore actually began a slow clap that was quickly picked up by Thomas Richardson and several others, who clearly felt that Victoria had delivered exactly the kind of firm but fair life lesson that some people desperately needed to hear. "Exactly right," Margaret called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Some people just don't understand boundaries, and it's actually a kindness to help them learn." Thomas Richardson nodded vigorously and added his own commentary for the benefit of the crowd. "This is exactly why we bank here instead of those other places. Standards matter, and someone has to maintain them." The humiliation was now complete and utterly public, with Sarah standing alone in the center of a marble lobby, surrounded by people who had decided that her simple clothing and quiet dignity were evidence of fundamental unworthiness, while security guards waited to physically remove her from an institution she had spent decades building into the success they were all so eager to protect from her presence. Marcus Webb nodded to Officer Peterson, and together they moved to flank Sarah with the practiced efficiency of security personnel who had performed this type of escort countless times before, though never with someone who maintained such quiet dignity in the face of public humiliation. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us now," Marcus said, his voice carrying the firm but professional tone he had perfected over years of removing unwanted individuals from the pristine environment he was paid to protect. Sarah looked around the lobby one final time, her gray eyes taking in the faces of the wealthy customers who watched her removal with expressions of satisfaction and approval, as if they were witnessing justice being served rather than a profound injustice being committed. She did not resist as the security officers positioned themselves on either side of her, but everyone present could see the fire burning behind her controlled exterior, the way her jaw tightened with each step toward the gleaming glass doors that would soon close behind her, like the final act of a carefully orchestrated rejection. Victoria followed the procession at a safe distance, her voice carrying clearly through the marble hall as she provided running commentary for the benefit of her audience. "This is exactly why we have security protocols in place," she announced, with the satisfied tone of someone who had successfully defended her territory against an inappropriate invasion. "Our customers deserve to conduct their business in an environment that reflects the quality and standards they've come to expect from First National Bank. We simply cannot allow our professional atmosphere to be compromised by individuals who don't understand appropriate behavior or social boundaries." Her words were met with continued murmurs of approval from Margaret Whitmore and Thomas Richardson, who clearly felt they were witnessing exemplary customer service and institutional protection. But near the teller stations, Jennifer Cole watched the scene unfold with growing unease and a nagging sense that something was terribly wrong with what she was witnessing. Unlike her colleagues and the gathered customers, Jennifer had actually looked at Sarah's identification, and while she hadn't had time to complete the account lookup that Victoria had demanded, something about the woman's calm dignity and quiet confidence suggested depths that no one else seemed to recognize or respect. Jennifer's instincts told her that they were making a catastrophic mistake, but her position as a junior employee left her powerless to intervene against Victoria's authority and the obvious support of their most important customers. As Sarah was escorted past Jennifer's station, their eyes met for just a moment, and Jennifer saw not the defeated embarrassment that everyone expected, but rather the controlled fury of someone who had been profoundly wronged and would not forget the experience or the people responsible for it. The heavy glass doors of First National Bank swung open with a whisper of conditioned air that carried with it the scent of marble polish and expensive cologne, and Sarah found herself stepping from the pristine luxury of the lobby into the harsh reality of the afternoon parking lot, where the summer heat hit her face like a physical slap. Marcus Webb and Officer Peterson maintained their professional escort positions until Sarah was clearly beyond the threshold, their duty completed with the satisfaction of men who believed they had successfully protected their institution from an unwanted intrusion. Behind them, Victoria Hartwell stood in the doorway for a moment, her silhouette framed by the crystal chandeliers and marble columns that represented everything she had worked so hard to preserve from inappropriate access. "I hope this has been a learning experience," Victoria called out in a voice loud enough to be heard by the customers who had gathered near the windows to witness the conclusion of the drama they had so enthusiastically supported. "Some people simply need to understand that there are boundaries in this world, and those boundaries exist for very good reasons. Perhaps now you'll think twice before trying to access services and environments that are clearly beyond your circumstances." Her final words hung in the air like a judge's sentence, delivered with the smug satisfaction of someone who believed she had just taught an important life lesson to someone too stubborn or ignorant to learn it gracefully. The massive glass doors swung closed with a soft but definitive thud that seemed to echo with finality, sealing Sarah outside, while the wealthy customers inside returned to their business, with the comfortable knowledge that their exclusive environment had been successfully defended against contamination. Sarah stood alone on the hot asphalt, her simple cardigan and comfortable jeans now feeling like evidence of guilt in some crime she had never committed, while the afternoon sun beat down on her graying hair and the parking lot stretched around her like a concrete desert of isolation and rejection. For several long moments she remained perfectly still, her hands clenched at her sides as she processed the full magnitude of what had just occurred, the complete and utter humiliation she had endured at the hands of people who worked for the institution she had spent her entire career building and protecting. The controlled fury that had been building throughout the encounter now threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. But even in this moment of profound violation, Sarah's dignity remained intact, her shoulders straight and her head high, as she began to understand that what had just happened would require consequences that none of the people inside that gleaming building could possibly imagine or prepare themselves to face. Sarah stood in the parking lot for another moment, allowing the heat and humiliation to wash over her. As she gathered the inner strength that had carried her through decades of corporate leadership and personal challenges that would have broken lesser individuals, then, with movements that were deliberate and controlled, she reached into her simple leather purse and withdrew her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found the number she needed most. David Chen answered on the second ring, his voice carrying the crisp professionalism of someone who had spent 8 years anticipating his boss's needs and handling the complex logistics of running a major financial institution. "Good afternoon, Sarah. How did your branch visit go today?" His tone was warm and familiar, the voice of someone who knew her well enough to sense when something was seriously wrong. "David," Sarah said, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent that immediately put her assistant on high alert. "I need you to arrange an emergency meeting with all senior staff for 4 o'clock this afternoon. I want every department head, every regional manager, and every executive vice president in the main conference room without exception. Cancel whatever meetings they have scheduled, reschedule whatever appointments need to be moved, and make it absolutely clear that attendance is mandatory." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line as David processed the unusual urgency in her request and the controlled anger that he could detect beneath her professional tone. "Of course, Sarah. May I ask what happened? You sound," he searched for the right word, "different." Sarah looked back at the gleaming glass doors of the bank, where she could still see Victoria Hartwell moving among the customers, like a queen holding court, accepting congratulations for her handling of an unpleasant situation. "I was just escorted out of our downtown branch by security, David. Physically removed from the premises after being publicly humiliated and told that I don't belong there because of the way I'm dressed. The branch manager, Victoria Hartwell, informed me and a lobby full of customers that people like me need to learn our place in society and that I should seek assistance programs instead of trying to access services that are clearly beyond my circumstances." Silence on David's end stretched for several seconds before he spoke again, his voice tight with shock and barely contained outrage. "They did what?" "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I'm calling everyone right now. This is going to be handled immediately. And I mean immediately. Give me 30 minutes. And I'll have every senior executive in that conference room ready to hear exactly what happened and what we're going to do about it." Inside the pristine lobby of First National Bank, Victoria Hartwell moved through the marble halls with the satisfied stride of someone who had just successfully defended her territory against an inappropriate invasion and earned the gratitude of everyone who mattered. Margaret Whitmore approached her with the enthusiastic approval of a customer who had witnessed exemplary service, her diamond jewelry catching the light from the crystal chandeliers as she extended her perfectly manicured hand. "Victoria, I have to tell you how impressed I am with the way you handled that situation," Margaret said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to having her opinions valued and respected. "That woman clearly had no business being in a place like this. And frankly, I was getting quite uncomfortable with her presence. You showed exactly the kind of leadership and professional judgment that makes this branch so superior to those other places." Thomas Richardson joined the impromptu receiving line, his expensive suit and gold cufflinks marking him as exactly the kind of client Victoria lived to serve and protect. "Absolutely right," he agreed with vigorous nodding. "Standards exist for a reason, and someone has to maintain them. That woman needed to learn a hard lesson about appropriate behavior and social boundaries, and you delivered it with exactly the right combination of firmness and professionalism." Victoria straightened her blazer with visible pride, her chest swelling with the satisfaction of someone who had just received validation for what she knew had been a difficult but necessary decision. "Thank you both so much for your understanding," she replied, with the gracious humility of someone who had simply done her job well under challenging circumstances. "I've always believed that our customers deserve an environment that reflects the quality and standards they've come to expect, and sometimes that requires making difficult decisions about who belongs here and who might be more comfortable elsewhere." Near the security station, Marcus Webb was regaling Officer Peterson and the other guards with a detailed account of the morning's events, his voice animated with the pride of someone who had successfully identified and neutralized a potential threat to institutional order. "You should have seen her trying to argue with Miss Hartwell," Marcus said with obvious satisfaction. "Some people just don't understand that you can't fake your way into places like this. She kept insisting she belonged here, but one look at those clothes and that attitude told you everything you needed to know." Officer Peterson nodded with the respect of a junior colleague learning from a master. "Good catch, Marcus. That's exactly the kind of situation they trained us to handle. Better to be safe than sorry when it comes to protecting our customers and maintaining our reputation." Marcus adjusted his perfectly pressed uniform with visible pride, confident that his 12 years of experience had once again proven invaluable in maintaining the exclusive atmosphere that made First National's downtown branch the preferred choice for the city's most important citizens. At exactly 3:45 in the afternoon, the gleaming glass doors of First National Bank's downtown branch swung open to admit a group of individuals whose presence immediately transformed the atmosphere of the marble lobby from comfortable satisfaction to electric tension. David Chen strode through the entrance with the purposeful confidence of someone accustomed to wielding significant corporate authority, his impeccably tailored suit and briefcase marking him as a figure of undeniable importance in the banking world. Behind him followed Executive Vice President Robert Harrison, Chief Operating Officer Amanda Foster, and Regional Director Michael Stevens, each of them moving with the measured pace of executives who had been summoned to address a crisis of institutional proportions. Flanking this corporate delegation were two members of Sarah's official security detail, professional men in dark suits, whose alert eyes immediately began scanning the lobby with the practiced assessment of individuals trained to protect high-value targets in potentially hostile environments. The sudden appearance of this formidable group sent a ripple of uncertainty through the previously comfortable atmosphere, and the wealthy customers who had been congratulating Victoria on her handling of the earlier situation now found themselves exchanging confused glances and hushed speculation about what could possibly bring such obviously important figures to their local branch on what had seemed like an ordinary afternoon. Victoria felt her stomach drop as she recognized the unmistakable signs of corporate intervention, and the confident smile that had been gracing her features for the past hour began to fade as she realized that something far more serious than a simple customer service issue was unfolding before her eyes. Marcus Webb straightened his uniform and stepped forward with professional alertness, his years of security training telling him that these were not ordinary visitors, but his recent success in handling the earlier disturbance gave him confidence that he was prepared for whatever situation might be developing. David Chen's gaze swept across the lobby with the clinical assessment of someone cataloging every detail for future reference, taking in the luxurious marble floors, the crystal chandeliers, and the faces of the staff members who were beginning to understand that their comfortable afternoon was about to become something entirely different. The corporate executives arranged themselves with strategic positioning that suggested they were preparing for a confrontation of significant proportions, and the security detail maintained their alert stance as David Chen approached the reception area where Victoria and Marcus were beginning to realize that their earlier triumph was about to transform into something they could never have anticipated or prepared themselves to handle. David Chen positioned himself in the center of the marble lobby, his presence commanding immediate attention from every staff member and customer within the expansive space, and when he spoke, his voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone delivering news that would fundamentally alter the understanding of everyone present. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced in a tone that cut through the whispered speculation and nervous energy like a blade through silk, "I am David Chen, Executive Assistant to the President and Chief Executive Officer of First National Bank. I am here today because approximately 1 hour ago, the staff of this branch committed what may be the most serious breach of professional conduct and institutional values in the history of our organization." The lobby fell into complete silence except for the soft hum of air and conditioning and the distant sound of traffic beyond the glass doors, and Victoria felt her heart begin to race with a growing sense of dread that she could not yet fully comprehend, but instinctively knew would destroy everything she had worked to build. David continued with the deliberate pace of someone delivering a verdict that would have lasting consequences for everyone involved. "The woman you escorted from this building, the woman you publicly humiliated and told did not belong here, the woman you suggested should seek assistance programs because she was clearly beyond her circumstances, was Sarah Mitchell, the President and Chief Executive Officer of First National Bank, the person who built this institution into what it is today and who signs every paycheck in this building." Victoria's face drained of all color as the words hit her like physical blows, her confident posture crumbling as the full magnitude of what she had done crashed over her in waves of horrified realization. The expensive blazer that had made her feel so professional and authoritative now felt like a costume she had been wearing while committing career suicide, and her hands began to tremble as she understood that she had not only humiliated her ultimate boss, but had done so publicly, and with the enthusiastic support of customers who were now staring at her with expressions of shock and dawning horror. Marcus Webb's confident stance collapsed entirely as his mind struggled to process the impossible reality that the woman he had approached with suspicion and escorted from the building was the person whose leadership had created the institution he was paid to protect, and the uniform he had worn with such pride now felt like evidence of his complete failure to understand the most basic requirements of his job. Margaret Whitmore and Thomas Richardson exchanged horrified glances as they realized they had not only witnessed but actively encouraged the public humiliation of one of the most powerful and respected figures in the banking industry, a woman whose quiet dignity they had mistaken for weakness, and whose simple clothing they had used to justify treatment that now seemed not just wrong but catastrophically misjudged in ways that would haunt them for years to come. The glass doors opened once again, and this time Sarah Mitchell entered her own institution, accompanied by the full weight of corporate authority that she had spent decades earning through competence, integrity, and unwavering commitment to treating every human being with dignity, regardless of their appearance or perceived status. She moved across the marble floor with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged there more than anyone else in the building, her simple cardigan and comfortable jeans now revealed as the deliberate choice of a leader who valued substance over style and authentic connection over superficial displays of power. Victoria Hartwell felt her legs grow weak as she watched the woman she had publicly humiliated return as the ultimate authority in the organization, and the congratulations she had received from wealthy customers now felt like evidence of her complete failure to understand the most basic principles of leadership and human decency. Marcus Webb stood frozen in his perfectly pressed uniform, his mind reeling as he realized that every assumption he had made about appearances and worthiness had led him to commit the most catastrophic error of his professional life, treating his ultimate employer as an unwelcome intruder who needed to be removed for the comfort of people who were no more important than she was and infinitely less powerful. Sarah positioned herself in the center of the lobby where she had been humiliated just an hour earlier. And when she spoke, her voice carried the moral authority of someone who had been profoundly wronged but remained committed to using the experience as an opportunity for education rather than simple revenge. "I want everyone in this building to understand what happened here today," Sarah said, her words carrying clearly through the marble halls that had witnessed her humiliation and would now witness her response to it. "I was judged, dismissed, and ultimately expelled from my own institution based solely on my appearance. Treated as if my simple clothing made me less worthy of respect and dignity than the customers you believed you were protecting. This represents a fundamental violation of everything First National Bank claims to stand for: every value we profess to uphold, and every principle of human decency that should guide our interactions with every person who walks through these doors." Her gray eyes swept across the faces of staff members and customers alike, and everyone present could feel the weight of moral judgment that came not from anger, but from disappointed leadership that had discovered a cancer growing at the heart of an institution she had devoted her life to building into something better than what they had witnessed today. Sarah moved through the lobby with the measured steps of a leader who understood that true authority came not from punishment, but from the wisdom to transform painful experiences into opportunities for meaningful institutional change. And when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of decisions that had been carefully considered during her time in the parking lot, gathering her thoughts and planning her response to a situation that could have destroyed her faith in human nature, but instead had strengthened her resolve to create something better. "Effective immediately," she announced to the assembled staff and customers, who hung on her every word with the rapt attention of people witnessing history unfold before their eyes. "Every employee of First National Bank will participate in comprehensive sensitivity training designed to ensure that what happened here today never occurs again in any of our locations. We will implement new policies that explicitly require every customer to be treated with identical respect and dignity regardless of their appearance, their perceived social status, or their apparent financial circumstances. And these policies will be enforced with consequences severe enough to ensure compliance at every level of our organization." Her gaze fell upon Victoria Hartwell, whose expensive blazer and perfectly styled hair now seemed like costumes worn by someone who had fundamentally misunderstood the role she was supposed to play in the institution she claimed to serve. "Miss Hartwell, your actions today demonstrate a complete failure to understand the values that define this organization. And while I believe in the possibility of redemption through education, you will be suspended without pay, pending completion of an intensive program designed to help you understand why every human being deserves to be treated with basic dignity. If you successfully complete this program and demonstrate genuine understanding of why your behavior was unacceptable, you will be reinstated in a position where you can rebuild trust through service to others rather than judgment of them." Marcus Webb felt his knees weaken as Sarah's attention turned to him with the same combination of disappointment and determination to create positive change from negative experience. "Mr. Webb, your role is to protect this institution and its customers, not to decide who deserves access based on your personal prejudices about appearance and social status. You will also participate in the same educational program, and if you complete it successfully, you will return to duties that focus on actual security threats rather than imagined social problems." Then Sarah's expression softened as she turned toward Jennifer Cole, whose respectful treatment of a customer she did not recognize had marked her as someone who understood instinctively what others had failed to learn through years of professional training. "Miss Cole, your behavior today demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership and human decency that this organization needs at every level, and I am promoting you to assistant branch manager with immediate effect because treating people with respect should be rewarded rather than overlooked." 6 months after the incident that had shaken First National Bank to its core, the downtown branch bore little resemblance to the exclusive fortress it had once been, transformed instead into a welcoming environment where every customer was greeted with the same warmth and respect regardless of their appearance or perceived circumstances. The marble floors still gleamed and the crystal chandeliers still cast their elegant light. But the atmosphere had fundamentally changed from one of judgment and exclusion to one of genuine service and human dignity. Victoria Hartwell stood in the same lobby where she had once delivered her patronizing lectures about social boundaries. But now she wore her authority differently, her perfectly styled hair and professional attire serving as tools for building bridges rather than walls between people. Her 3 months of intensive sensitivity training had been followed by another 3 months of community service at local homeless shelters and food banks, experiences that had shattered her assumptions about worth and worthiness in ways that no corporate seminar ever could have achieved. The woman who had once spoken condescendingly about people knowing their place in society now led the bank's diversity and inclusion initiatives, traveling to schools in underserved communities to teach financial literacy and working tirelessly to ensure that First National's services reached every member of the community with equal enthusiasm and respect. Her transformation had been so complete and authentic that Sarah Mitchell had entrusted her with expanding these programs throughout the entire banking system, recognizing that Victoria's journey from prejudice to understanding made her uniquely qualified to help others navigate the same difficult path toward genuine human connection. Marcus Webb had undergone his own remarkable transformation. His security training now focused on protecting customers from actual threats rather than protecting the institution from people he deemed unworthy of access. He had become the bank's most passionate advocate for respectful customer service, sharing his story with new employees as a cautionary tale about the dangers of judging people based on appearances and the importance of treating every individual as someone deserving of dignity and respect. His 12 years of experience had given him credibility with younger staff members who might have dismissed lectures from management, but who listened intently when Marcus explained how his own prejudices had nearly cost him his career and had definitely cost him his self-respect. The branch that had once been known for its exclusivity was now celebrated throughout the banking industry as a model of inclusive service, and customers who had once felt intimidated by its atmosphere now found it to be the most welcoming and supportive financial institution they had ever encountered. Sarah Mitchell stood once again in the lobby of the downtown branch, but this time her simple cardigan and comfortable jeans were greeted with genuine smiles and respectful service from every staff member, a transformation that filled her with quiet pride, not because of the deference shown to her position, but because of the authentic dignity now extended to every person who walked through those gleaming glass doors. The marble floors that had once witnessed her humiliation now reflected the warm interactions between employees and customers from all walks of life. Elderly pensioners receiving the same attentive service as wealthy investors, young families being welcomed with the same enthusiasm as established business owners. Jennifer Cole, now the branch manager, had created an environment where respect was not rationed based on appearance, but offered freely as the foundation of every human interaction. Victoria's diversity programs had expanded beyond First National to become a model for financial institutions nationwide, and her personal journey, from prejudice to understanding, resonating with organizations struggling to build truly inclusive cultures. Marcus had become a sought-after speaker at security conferences, sharing his story of how assumptions about worthiness had nearly destroyed his career and teaching others that true security meant protecting everyone's dignity, not just their physical safety. The incident that could have been merely a source of pain and anger had instead become the catalyst for transforming an entire institution's understanding of what it meant to serve others with genuine respect and compassion. Sarah often reflected on how her most humiliating professional experience had ultimately become her most meaningful achievement, proving that even the deepest wounds could become sources of healing for others when approached with wisdom and determination to create positive change. The bank that had once excluded people based on appearance now stood as a beacon of inclusive service, demonstrating that true excellence came not from serving only the privileged few, but from treating every human being as deserving of dignity and respect. If you have ever been judged by your appearance, dismissed because of how you dress, or made to feel unworthy based on superficial characteristics, you are not alone in that experience. Each of us has the power to break the cycle of judgment and prejudice by choosing to see beyond surface appearances, to recognize the inherent worth of every person we encounter. Take a moment to examine your own assumptions about people based on how they look, where they come from, or what they wear, and challenge yourself to offer the same respect and kindness to everyone, regardless of their circumstances. Share your own stories of overcoming prejudice or witnessing the transformation that comes when people choose understanding over judgment, because these experiences remind us all that beneath our differences in appearance and circumstance lies the same fundamental human dignity that connects us all.